Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure and quite extraordinary to be here and to share experiences and ideas with all of you, with all your brilliant ideas, because you're all wonderful people. So this is really a privilege for me, and I hope. I mean, my intention is to pay back by giving you something to take with you from this. So the way why I'm here talking is because I think that over the years that I've been doing coaching of teams, personal coaching, and also looking at how we as individuals can become better, there's a lot of things that are starting to fall into place. In the beginning, in the outset, I thought that we just need to be smarter. That was it. What if people could just be less dumb? Sadly that's hard. I mean, we have the hardware we have inside the head, and we have the values we have, but we can work with the stuff we have internalized throughout the years we've been growing up. It's communication, transparency, and practice. I firmly believe that if we look less on the technologies and the enabling technologies we use in everyday work, and we focus more on these things that are within ourselves, we can grow our potential as individuals, teams, and organizations. So there's a lot of things that affect how we work. It could be external things outside of our control, like weather, car jams, internet going down, whatever. And there are internal things, like our values, ideas. So why don't we start talking about that? Let's start talking about communication. Communication is the only known substitute for telepathy. It's a fact. But when we're working, we are very centralized within ourselves, and our focus is very often on the technical deliverable that we're trying to produce. And that is sound. It is a sound thing. It is the technical deliverable that you sell and that will eventually give you salary to put food on the table. So it's a very good thing to focus on that. We are kind of assuming that we are working well enough as humans communicating. The assumption is that we are brought up in a society and we kind of know how to collaborate with others. But still, there's a big elephant in the room that we rarely look at, is that, yeah, that person is weird to work with. I don't want to ask him or her a question because he or she is rude. We have all these preconceptions and fears that I think we could address a lot more. This is just a theory I have. It just isn't proven or anything. I claim that a company is a big collection of brains. Brains that, if they could, they would access each other's memories and knowledge instantly. We cannot do that because they are separated. They are separated in space. So the way these brains try to access each other's memories and knowledge is by communication. Human-to-human communication. This is why I think communication is very important to look at and actually think about. Think about seriously. It is easier to try to improve communication by buying new business communication suites, by upgrading the email stuff, by having a lot more technology around it. But that is just support wheels. I think that if we as humans think more about communication, there's a big potential that we can leverage. However, reality is perceived. This is one of the core problems with communication. There is no right or wrong way to perceive reality. That is why I think philosophy is really interesting. There are ways that can facilitate or make a certain idea harder to reach if you perceive reality in that way. But there is no given way to perceive reality. When you see something, you're adding meaning to it. You're making interpretations. Listening to this, what I'm saying, you're making your own interpretation, you're selecting data, you're adding meaning to it, and you're making assumptions about it. This guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. Or, oh, he has a white shirt, he must know what he's talking about. There's a lot of perceptions and a lot of assumptions being made. There are models for this. There are models that address how people think, but the only thing we know about models is that they're wrong. However, we can still talk about it. We can still try to externalize and receive the feedback. So, with this in mind, keep in mind that reality is perceived. No one perceives it correctly or incorrectly. There are things that makes it harder to reach your goal. Doesn't say that it's incorrect, but it's something called a cognitive bias. There are roughly 56 named cognitive biases. This is from psychology, social psychology. It is the rules of thumb that makes it easier to make fast decisions. It's a mental heuristic. It makes it easy to make a decision. I don't need to think every time like, should I use this thing or not? My mental cognitive bias, my rule of thumb, says that the last time I used it, it worked. So I will probably use it again. It's a fast decision making. One of the properties of cognitive biases is that they might, as a side effect, lead to illogical thinking, or what is called irrationality. Because the world is simplified so much that it's oversimplified. When you're working in a too simplified environment that you have left reality, that you're leaving out important details of the context you're within, you're making illogical decisions. So I want to just mention there are three main categories of cognitive biases, just to be aware about. The decision-making, social, and memory errors and biases. They have been classified into three groups. The decision-making, for example, it's a stuff that affects how we make decisions. There is one within here that is, I think it's extra interesting for people who are domain experts. It's called the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is a cognitive bias that makes it hard for experts to relate to non-experts' hardship of understanding their description of their problem. It's really hard for experts to understand this. In a musical school, they actually tried to find a way to counter the curse of knowledge, and the way they did that was by these music teachers who were really skilled. They had to play the guitar with the wrong hand for 10 minutes before giving the class. Just doing that. And then they asked the students, the students were not aware about this. How do you perceive this class? I was really good. It's like the teacher was really listening and was less rude. Now I think that should be feedback to the teacher that he's rude in all of the classes. But it's the curse of knowledge. It's something that we have. There's another cognitive bias, that is the belief that you don't have cognitive biases. Has to be aware about that. So we all have them. The social biases, for example, group attribution error, the belief that one individual from a specific group, if that has one property, the bias is that you think that the whole group has that property, which is the basis for racism. And it's to make, I think it was there to make fast judgments. Maybe I'm just talking way out of my depth, but if you have seen a person from one tribe come over and kill your whole family, and then that could be good to remember that person with these markings on the face could be dangerous. Assume that, make that assumption. Stay alive. I don't know. Memory errors and biases. This is a really interesting one because this is applied to gaming and also if you go to restaurants. Peak end rule. That the average remembered enjoyment of something correlates to the peak and to the end. If I liked a game, it was because at the top of the game, when I enjoyed it the most, I will remember that. And I will remember how the game ends. If you go to a restaurant and they give really good food, they can always play on that by topping off at the end, giving you a free chocolate or a free cold wine or something like that. That's peak end rule. Also goes for movies. Peak end rule. So given this, we have these bugs, and we're spending a lot of effort on technical stuff. I want to give you one tool, which maybe some of you have heard of it. If you have heard of it, that's okay. I think it's good to repeat. Something called non-violent communication. That's a communication process developed in the 1960s. It's usually referred to when you talk about how to resolve conflicts, but in reality it can be applied to everything. It was Marshall Rosenberg, I just had to get the name right. Marshall Rosenberg, who died actually this year. It's quite sad. It focuses on self-empathy, the ability for yourself to be connected to your own emotions, empathy is being able to connect to others, and honest self-expression, that you are able to express yourself honestly. It uses two animals as logos. It's the giraffe, because the giraffe is the land animal with the largest heart, and it stands for the non-violent part of the communication. And the jackal, which stands for competition. So the idea is that when you're communicating, we believe that there are conflicts because the different strategies we use to express and to reach our goals, they collide. It's about being clear about expectations. If you're not clear about expectations, you go into a different strategy to try and fulfill that need. Marshall Rosenberg was extremely convinced that feelings, emotions, are a telltale if your need is being fulfilled or not. Okay. What other thing to say could be good about this? The non-violent communication is also based on that. If I communicate and I express my needs and my emotions clearly, if I start to use violent language, which is, we will see what that is, then I'm diverting your attention from my needs. Because violence feeds violence. Violent language is judging, criticizing, some derogatory stuff. For example, "Oh, you are such a lousy person. You're weak. You're not intelligent enough." What I'm really expressing is something else. When I'm saying this when I'm using what is called the jackal language, the non-unifying language, I'm really trying to express a feeling I have. That's what I'm really trying to do. If I want to try to be more like the giraffe, the big heart, I will use the non-violent communication process. Here it is. How do we do that? The first thing is to observe. Observe the situation and decouple judgment from observation. This is a hard thing to do. And it's really good, because when I'm forced to do this, I'm kind of thinking about myself. What do I really feel? Why do I feel like this? Why am I thinking that Morten, sorry for picking a victim here, why am I thinking that Morten is rude? No, he isn't. That was a jackal speaking. The giraffe started to think, I am observing that Morten is looking away when I'm talking to him. That's an observation. That's not a judgment. The next thing to do is to, express it. So I have observed something, then I say it. You know what, Morten? When I'm talking to you and you look away, then I feel ignored. That's the root of the feeling. Then why do I have this need? What is this stemming from? Can I dig that deep? Well, I have a need of being seen. We all do. We all have a need of being seen, right? It's about self-empathy, being able to dig deep into yourself. And then what you can do is to formulate something. And in the last step, you say what you would like to see instead, which is not a command. It's a request. You must be able to take a no. So this example with Morten, which is completely taken out of air, this hasn't happened, is that, the jackal first is like, he's so rude. But then I take the stance of the giraffe, and I'm like, I'm observing that when I talk to Morten, he usually looks away. I'm thinking, okay, my need is for him to look at me when I'm talking to him. Maybe there already it's a branching point. Maybe I don't really need that. Maybe I just need to learn to live with that. But my need is for him to look at me when I'm talking to him. So I say, Morten, you know what? I would appreciate if you could look at me when I talk to you. And he can reply, "Oh, I'm sorry, Gianfranco. I didn't know. Actually, I have impaired hearing on one ear. My left ear I don't really hear you when you're standing there." Oh, okay, good. So there's no conflict there. I don't need to judge him. No, nothing. This is one tool. And this is something that you can practice at all times, just thinking about these steps. Self-empathy and how to express yourself. This works within a team, when writing emails, anything really. Another thing is transparency. I like to talk about that because transparency builds trust. Transparency is about grace. It's about having fierce discussions. It's about showing emotions. It's about showing weaknesses, humility. Transparency is about giving people the ability to see why you operate the way you do, why you make the decisions you do, and what decisions you make. Transparency as an individual is extremely valuable. What it basically entails is that without disclosing too much of my personal details that I don't feel comfortable with, I give you the opportunity to look at the source code of the program that is running within me, more or less. I am opening up. I'm showing my vulnerability. This is something that is taught in like new courses for leadership. It's like the new leadership stuff. This is something that we're trying to apply within Ericsson, which is a company with like 120,000 employees and more than that. Is that practice transparency on every level, on individual, team, and organization. As an individual, if I practice transparency, if I connect it to the giraffe stuff of digging deep into myself and being able to express my emotions, I'm practicing every day crystallization. I'm practicing putting words on feelings. I'm practicing putting images to what I really have. Because a gut feeling could be the thing that saves us. I could be working with a colleague, and I'm looking at the code. I don't really know, but I know something is wrong. I don't really know. If I would be like the silent, okay, no, feelings have nothing to do with work, I might ignore it. But I might have a gut feeling that something is not right. And I'm expressing it, saying, you know what, Tom, I think there's a problem here. I don't really know what it is, but I feel uncomfortable about what is this piece of code here. It's really hard to understand. I don't think it's correct, because if we reference this to the protocols that are standardized, I think we might find a problem there. So I think you should be able to go a lot on gut feeling, because a lot of our ideas are just that. They are a lot of emotions before you have crystallized it out of your skull. Surely you have all been to a lecture in mathematics perhaps, and when it's being presented, you're like, yeah, okay, I know that. Yes, looks good, looks logical. But when you go to practice it, when you have to prove to yourself if you know it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to look at those examples again. I don't really remember how that was. That's because there is a big difference between believing something and knowing it. When you practice being transparent, lifting out stuff, you're lifting it out of your skull. Then you really know what you know. Transparency in teams is really good. It's good for a team to really see itself. It's about a team looking at how do we handle stuff. There's a lot of implicit assumptions, implicit knowledge that is living, distributed among people. My team, we started doing this practice where we save the victories. I think there was a comment here earlier by Morten that you don't celebrate your victories enough. I think that's important. That's part of being transparent for a team, is to be able to look at itself, at its past and present. If a team is transparent, it can look at its past and present, and so can others. They can see that. So team transparency is good because other people around the team understands the power structure within the team. You might be hoping that you have a flat team. Maybe practicing transparency shows that there is a hierarchy. But maybe that's okay. For organizations, organizational transparency is a very hard thing. An organization is a complex adaptive system. It's a huge ecosystem with you have people in the core that they might be operating because they know someone at another. They are maybe not sending emails or something. They just know someone. They contacted them immediately. There might be established interfaces. There are ways of working. There are roles. Every role have their own goals. There are key performance metrics. There is everything. It's a huge system with a lot of complexity. So what do you do with a transparent organization? One of the things is that everyone in the organization is aware of their place in the system. They are aware of what they do, and they are aware of the strategy of the company. They are aware why that strategy is there. They understand how everything works end to end. They understand how a customer comes in, how the requirements are gathered. They understand what happens next. So the system can look at itself, it becomes self-aware. Such kind of systems can reinvent themselves when they need to, because all the information is there. You cannot improve something that you don't understand how it works. You have to understand how the engine works if you want to improve it. That's one of the prerequisites. So that's a challenge usually for the leadership to build a transparent organization. So what tool for this? What is the tool I want to give you? Some of you probably recognize as well the johari window developed by two gentlemen. It's a communication tool to improve transparency and trust. The way this works is that as an individual, I have 4 areas. What is shared is known to myself and known to others. What is in my blind spot, it is not known by me, but it is known to others. The hidden is not known to others, but known by me, of course. It could be stuff that I feel uncomfortable about revealing. And the double blind spot is the unknown. The goal of this is to increase the shared area. Because when we know more about each other, we work more effectively. We make less assumptions that are weird. It could be that, oh, that guy is always coming in late. He's coming in last and leaving first. What is up with that guy? Well, maybe that guy has a lot of problems at home. Maybe he has a sickness. It could be whatever. The more we know about each other, the more we can behave like human beings, the more like warm people. Because people work the best when they feel loved. What we do first is that we try to tell more to others about ourselves. We're expanding the shared down to hidden. So the hidden area becomes smaller by telling more about our history, about ourselves. Because we know more about each other, we can receive more feedback. So people can tell more to you. They can tell you things. They can give you more feedback. When you receive more feedback, the blind spot gets smaller. So we know more about each other. We can give more feedback. This tool has proven to work quite well, and it's something that I would recommend highly. Just think about how much hidden or how much blind do you have. Just examples. Blind could be that everyone else thinks that you are slightly angry every day when you get into work for the first 2 hours in the morning. Maybe you don't perceive, but everyone else thinks so. Because that's something that could be brought up in a meeting, like, yeah, that Gianfranco is always angry in the morning. God, it's quite hard to work with. But I don't know it. If I had more trust, more communication, I would receive that feedback, and I could improve as a person. Lastly, it's practice. I think that's something that touches all of us, independently of how skilled you are. Maybe you've heard about Dan Pink, The Puzzle of Motivation. It's a TED Talk from 2009. It's what motivates people. What motivates people. And he brought up a really interesting subject that time and time again it's been proven. It's proven now, there's no question about it, that what motivates people is not money or carrot or stick. It's something else. And they have made a lot of trials now that have been, I would say it's proven trials that people who do cognitive work, they don't perform better by higher incentives. They perform worse. So what motivates people? Why are people working on things like open source or whatever? It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what motivates people. Autonomy is the feeling of directing yourself. Mastery is of getting good. It's becoming an expert in something that matters. And the purpose is working for something that you feel is larger than yourself. I like to focus on mastery, because that's something, being the founder of the Stockholm software craftsmanship community, expertise and technical mastery is really interesting to me. I think it's fascinating. So what about mastery? And I found a really good paper from the North American Psychology Association about expert performance. And I read that front to back, and there's a really interesting findings that I would like to share. What makes experts? Is it people with high IQ? Is it people that perform well on tests like aptitude tests? Can that be predicted? Well, results say that no. There is a very low correlation between people that have a high IQ, that score high on standardized IQ tests, and people that score high on these aptitude tests and IQ tests, and what becomes an expert performer at all. There is like a very weak correlation, like 0.2, so basically non-existent. So, and this puzzled these people. What makes an expert then? It's not IQ people, but how does that work? Well, they were looking at a lot of different fields. I chose this graph. It's of violinists. I like music as well. And from this particular thing, it's a very respected music school in Germany. They were looking at people's history and past. So they have people who became teachers, which was classified as non-experts within music. For some reason, I don't know. And then people who were good, there were people who actually made it to work within the symphonic orchestra at some point. And then people who were the best. There was people who made it to play in symphonic orchestras and also make their own music. And they actually made an impression. So they are, in this article, they are talking about eminent people. What they use that word, eminent people. And they seem to use eminent and expert interchangeably. So eminent people, what is the difference here? Well, according to their own data and their own analysis, it's the amount of hours spent practicing for these violinists. By the age of 18, the best people, they have spent roughly 7,400 hours practicing. The ones that were good have spent 5,300, and the ones that were teachers eventually have spent 3,400, more than half the time than those that became eminent. They were analyzing more data on this, like authors, mathematicians. They say scientists. I don't know what they mean really. Maybe they mean like people working within the science labs, and the people who do livestock analysis and other stuff. And what they found was something that they call the 10-year rule, which is a rule of thumb. The rule of thumb, that 10-year rule, has been quoted in a lot of different places. It states that it takes roughly 10 years of practice from being introduced into a field until you can become an expert. But it's like hard practice. And that's interesting. I think it's interesting because it gives a lot of hope as well. Not everyone is like Roger Huey, that has an advantage over the rest of us. I spent a lot of time programming when I was younger. And I programmed a lot during my university years. I spent a lot of time programming. And that's something that I perceive at work. The people that perceive me as the best at work, I think the difference between them and me is just that I have been sitting a lot of nights programming. That was it. I didn't go out, do so much stuff. I sat at home programming. I think that is how we the programmers, practice. By working with toy problems, working with ideas we have. It's not about sitting down and like practicing something spectacular. Like, it's not like I will practice running 100 meters. I think programmers practice by playing a lot. I think that's important. I think that we should try to remember that. It takes roughly 10 years of practice to become an expert. So the question is, should you just work for 10 years? No. they actually cover this as well, and they say that there are 3 different types of performance. There is work when you rely on entrenched methods and you're stressed because of the monetary reward. Then there is play, where you perform just for the sake of enjoying the performance. And then there is deliberate practice. When they were studying athletes who also seemed to be under this rule of 10 years, the athletes and the violinists both reported that deliberate practice had been extremely important, but non-enjoyable. So far, when I'm working with my toy projects, I'm enjoying myself. So I think that we are blessed, and we should remember that we are blessed. It's so easy for us to actually practice. So how much practice? I think that's up to each one of you. I could say the numbers that are in the report, that around 2 hours seems to be the deal. When they look at financially independent authors who have been eminent classified, those authors usually work 4 hours in the morning, and then they do something else for the rest of the day. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's a sweet spot. I do not know. This work hasn't covered programmers. It did cover mathematicians and scientists, as I say, and livestock classifiers and people working within a lot of fields of expertise. Should we mandate practice is the last question. I don't know. I don't believe in that, but I believe that we should create the space and the time to allow the programmers to practice the way we practice best, by playing with stuff. Having the time and space to try that out. I just try that out, that one thing. I can just sit down and try it. I think that's the way you can grow programs really, really easily. I don't have anything else, but before I finish, I think that having thought about this a lot, when I was writing this presentation, it was something else that I couldn't fit in. There was no logical progression, so I'm taking it now at the end, when it's cut off. I think programmers have different stages of maturity. Just like a child matures, I think a programmer starts out, and we're usually connected. We have a very strong emotional bond to the language we use. And this is, when I started programming, I learned C++ first. That was, to me, that was the world, that was the moon, that was everything. I thought that any problem could be solved in C++ if I just got the right amount of time and the right amount of stuff. And I think that one step of that maturity journey is to let go of the language, not being emotionally connected to that. Is to see that there are other languages and what can you do? And I think that's happening here, definitely. You're looking at JavaScript and HTML and whatever. I think the next step for a programmer to mature is to disconnect him or herself from the code. That the code is not a physical or esoteric representation of the intelligence. The code is code. It's like clay. You rework it. Just like when you work with clay, you form the vase and then you manipulate it with your hands. But code is not really finished, I think. Code has its own life. You can go in and modify it again later. When you're doing optimizations to your system, you're going in and you're changing it again. The next thing is to let go of your own ideas. I'm struggling with that right now. It's really hard. I'm trying to make that journey. Letting go of your own ideas is that, oh, I would really like to code that really cool thing, that application, that little toy, but I want to do it. So I will keep it to myself, and when I come home, I'm going to squirrel away and start coding it immediately. If I was mature enough, I would let go of the idea and say, I want to do this thing, but I don't really have the time now. Would someone like to do this thing? I think that's really hard. I think it's some of the toughest I'm battling right now, because I have a lot of ideas, but I need to try and let go of those ideas. Now I think there's time for questions and comments.
So I can sort of understand why there's a better correlation between practice and this achieving really high skill, but I don't understand why there isn't also a high correlation between aptitude and doing the practice. So I would have expected that aptitude would still have a good correlation. What's the reason for that? Do you have any
What is the reason for that? I don't know. It's just mentioned very briefly when they're trying to look for correlations. What is stated, though, that I didn't say, is that there is a correlation for the first 3 months. But after that, there is no connection to who becomes eminent. So they're talking about on the first 3 months, you can see on-the-job success. So people who perform very well on the aptitude test got a very good job success for the first 3 months. After that, they wasn't correlated to if they become eminent or expert performers, so to say. I guessing that because the aptitude tests is probably fixed, I guess, but the world around it changes. Requirements change. The product might change. Could be.
Have you done any studies within your own team with regards to how well you have, or have you been able to improve performance? Have you been able to improve output, results, applying these methodologies?
My team, we work in what is called the mob, where you have one machine and all the people work on the same machine. As a side effect of that, you get a lot of communication day to day. And we received the feedback quite recently from a product owner. A product owner in Ericsson is someone who gets the requirements of stuff that needs to be done, stuff that gives money, and they will schedule what is the most important thing that needs to be done now for our team. We got the feedback from our product owner that we had a very high level of skill within the team, and we were very good at handling pressure and doing context switching. My belief is just that because you are sharing the stress within the team is one entity. We are as one. I think we can work a lot more relaxed and just work. Because that also goes with another finding that people who are preoccupied with details, could be monetary details or family details, people who are stressed, they perform worse on IQ tests. And it's another talk by another guy that shows that he says that people get stupid when we're stressed. And I think that if you can work relaxed and you can enjoy your work, I think you perform a lot better. So I think the way we work is that we try to work as a group of friends, as a family. We can talk about anything at work, and I think it's okay. And I think that's the way it should be, because you spend 8 hours at work, maybe more, and it's during the prime time when you're awake. If you cannot be human during that time, then when can you be human? Okay. There is no more time. Sorry for that.